Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to run you through how to animate on your local computer with Deforum Stable Diffusion. I've had a lot of fun with this. I hope you get something out of this video and you're able to get it up and running and you have as much fun with it as I do. In this video I'm going to kind of run you through the assumptions that I'm making about what you already have knowledge-wise and hardware-wise. Then I'm going to run you through the setup that I'm running it on, which is pretty inexpensive. Let me kind of run you through some assumptions, and then I'll get you into the setup that I'm using to show you that it doesn't have to be super expensive to run this on a reasonable computer. You can do it for about 350 bucks. I'll show you how. So the assumptions I'm going to make in this video are that you at least have some familiarity with how to use Stable Diffusion. You've used kind of the web UI version of it and played with some of the settings. If you haven't, I'm going to post a couple of links. One on just the basic how to install Stable Diffusion locally. The web UI version, I think that it's going to be useful for you. I use it a lot to come up with like starting points for animations. And then I'm also going to post a video by Albert Bozesan. I think that's how you pronounce it. He gives a really awesome video on how to generate video game assets with Stable Diffusion. It goes through a few examples, and it was a really eye-opening video to me. It walks you through a lot of the settings and what you can actually do with them to squeeze things out in the image-to-image settings in Stable Diffusion to get something really rough that you might draw in Paint to something that looks really cool. Definitely worth watching. If you already have Stable Diffusion installed, you should have Miniconda and Git already installed on your computer. If you don't, I'll also post links to those. You just need to install those. I think the basic settings are fine. My setup, let me run you through what I'm running this system on. So I bought an old Dell Optiplex 7020 tower that has an Intel Core i5 in it. It's also a full-size box, so it fits a video card in it. The power supply is a little weak to run a decent video card, so I also bought an additional power supply and an add 2 PSU to be able to run that to power the video card. The video card that I'm using is Quadro M4000. It's got 8 gigs of VRAM. I've got I think it's a GTX 1650 with 4 gigs of RAM in it, which runs circles around this for playing games and stuff like that, but it doesn't have enough VRAM to run Stable Diffusion the way I want to. So you can pick these up for, 120, 130 bucks. I pulled this the other day and I found one for 135 bucks. Not a bad price. Then you need a couple of cables to hook everything up. But altogether, you can have a 16 gig of RAM desktop with a decent CPU in it and an 8 gig VRAM video card for 355 bucks. That's based on everything that I've bought. If there's any interest in kind of running through how to set that type of system up, let me know and I'll post another video on it, but just kind of wanted to give you an idea that you don't have to have, $1,000 machine to run this on. You can do it pretty inexpensively. I'm going to walk you through the basic setup here. So you're going to want to go to see, the Deforum Stable Diffusion local GitHub. I'll post the link to it below. You're going to go to code and you're going to download zip. When you do that, it's going to show up in your downloads. You're going to open the zip file and copy this over to wherever you're going to install it. So now, like I said, you should already have Git and Miniconda installed, but the instructions say to you're going to want to open an Anaconda prompt, which you can get to by going down here in the search and typing Anaconda, and it'll bring up the prompt. So I've got this set up in test, so I'm going to type to switch to my E drive. I'm going to do CD for change directory test, and I'm where I am, where I have the file in. If I type dir, I can see it there. So if I type cd to change directory into where the stuff is, this is where we're going to do the install. So we are going to, first of all, create the environment that we need to create. I've already got an environment called DSD, so I'm going to name this DSD2, but on the installation it gives you this command here. So we're going to go conda create dash name DSD Python equals 3.8.5 dash y. I should have just copied and pasted that, but hey, good to exercise the fingers. So again, I already created DSD, so we're going to call it DSD2. Give that a second to run. You should get back here, and the screen should look like that. So we want to activate the environment that we just set up, so we type conda activate DSD2. So now the program knows all the right versions of things to use for Deforum Stable Diffusion. And then we're just going to type python setup.py, and this is going to take 5 or 10 minutes, so I'm going to kind of fast forward into the future here, but you're going to let that run for a few minutes. Alright, everything looks like it installed. This is what the screen should look like after you're done. So we're going to go to the next part of the install, where we drop in the model files. So there's 3 model files you're going to need. The first one is the regular version 1.4 Stable Diffusion checkpoint that you're probably using locally on your computer already. If not, you can go to Hugging Face and download it from there. They'll make you sign in and create an account, but after that you can just download the file. Then there's another file for Midas, which I'll explain here in a second, and another file called AdaBins. So I have already downloaded those. So let's see where we've got them. Go to download. So the first one, SDV, the 1.4 checkpoint, we're going to put in the main Deforum Stable Diffusion folder under models. If you're using it in Stable Diffusion, you might have renamed it model.ckpt. You're going to want to rename it back to this sd-v1-4.ckpt. The system will do a checksum to make sure that it's the right file, and it expects it to be named that way. So we're going to copy that to there. The next one, Midas, we are going to put in the models folder as well. So, okay, the first one copied, so where do I have Midas here? Take that, copy it there. And then the third one, AdaBins-NYU. We're going to go up a folder and go to pre-trained, and we're going to grab this AdaBins.NYU file and copy it here. So that's pretty much it. That's the install. So now that we've done that, if you scroll down a little further here in the Git page, this first command here is what you want to run just to test it out. There should be, in the main directory, there is a run settings underscore template, and we're going to go back to our Anaconda command prompt here, copy this, drop it in there, and wait for a minute. So once it starts generating the individual frames, you know it's working. So while it's doing that for a minute, I will kind of explain what Midas is. Midas uses fancy algorithms to generate depth maps, and the way that this system uses it is for adjusting the camera angle, which I'll show you how to do here in a minute. But it's pretty neat software. That's what the other model file is in the models directory. So back over here to this for a second. This should start generating frames in just a minute. I'm going to open up the run settings template while this is running and give you kind of a rundown of what all this means. So batch name, the first one, is going to name the folder where you're generating all the frames in the video. So I believe that on this one it's going to put it in a file called task name. So let's go back here and see if it's generating anything yet. Okay, starting to generate first image. So if we go back over to Deforum Stable Diffusion and we go to output, it'll make a folder with the year and the month, and then you see that it's created the task name. So it will, every time you restart the run, it'll put this settings file in here. This is just to kind of let you know which settings you had in the last run, which can be handy when you're restarting things. But that's what batch name is. So prompts, I don't even use this. I think this will kind of guide it somehow, but I normally leave that piece blank, which in a different config file, this one is another test that you can run that's pretty similar, but they have prompts empty. This one is also, I think this is actually the first one that I ran. Excuse me. And it doesn't have any of those prompts in here. It does have the animation prompts down here, which I'll get to in a second. So there's a width and a height setting. which are the same as the Stable Diffusion arguments. The seed that you want to use for the first image, and then seed behavior, which is by default iter, which just iterates to the next seed. So every image that it starts going through, you see that the global seed is set to a number ending in 2.6 here, and then on the next one it uses 2.7, so it just iterates up on the seeds for every next image. Sampler, this will let you choose the sampler that you're using if you switch those at all in Stable Diffusion and have a preference for which one you want. The steps is the number of sampling steps that it will use. Generally speaking, based on other things I've seen about Stable Diffusion, 50 is enough to get you a pretty high quality image. If you want to play with it and try to get more detail in something, I've had some success sometimes in increasing this to 75 or even 100. It takes a little bit longer to run, but not too bad, and it will sometimes give you a more detailed image. Scale, I'm not sure what that does. This one, I'm not sure what that does. I leave those the same. This I leave the same as well. I'll show you in the over here where it's generating the files now in output. It gives you the time string, so year, month, day, hour, which is a little after midnight here, 22 minutes and 46 seconds, underscore, and then a 5-digit number to indicate the image position in the sequence. So I just leave that the same. It makes it pretty easy to deal with. If you want to use an initialization image to kind of input some like an image-to-image type setup, you can use these three options. I don't normally do this. There is an easier way to kind of get what you want, which I'll show you probably in my next video with resume timestring. You can kind of develop the image that you want using the web UI version of Stable Diffusion, and then trick the system into using that as your starting point. But if you did want to use like an image-to-image type setup, you could change this to true, put the path to the file in there, and then play with the strength value. I believe the strength value is how strongly it lets the init image affect the subsequent image. So I think that's what it does. I haven't played with that too much because, again, I think there's a better way to do that. If you wanted to use masks, they give an example in the examples folder of how to do that. I mean, I think it's a useful feature if you were going to generate, like if you were going to use this as just like a image generator to generate a few images, but it's way easier to do that in the web UI version, so I just leave those alone. So where it gets interesting are the animation prompts. So what this is going to tell it is you start with the frame number, which is 0 for your first prompt. So it's going to use this prompt to generate your first 9 frames. When it hits frame 10, it's going to change to this prompt and use the image 9 as kind of a starting point and try to start morphing into this. And then when it hits image 20, it's going to try to start morphing into this. The default settings, I mean, you'll see it when we look at the output video here in a minute, but we're starting with a full body portrait of a woman and then trying to switch to a beautiful, amazing alien landscape. So it starts putting some elements of that in the woman's clothing, but it doesn't immediately change it to an alien landscape. And then when you hit 20, it again kind of does the same thing. It starts putting elements of a desolate city in there. So this gives you sort of the sequence of what prompts it's going to use to generate the frames. So next, I normally leave the animation mode 3D the same. I haven't played with that much. Max frames is going to give the maximum, like the number of total frames that it's going to generate. Diffusion cadence I haven't played with. Border I haven't played with. Angle I haven't played with. Zoom I use the translation X, Y, and Z and the rotation X, Y, and Z to get what I want. I haven't played with zoom that much. I think what this will do is basically leave the virtual camera position the same and just, it's like it's zooming a lens in rather than these, which actually move where the true camera position is. So the way this works, translation X, Y, and Z, X will move you left and right, left being negative, right being positive. So Y will move you up and down, with up being positive and down being negative. And Z will move you forward and backwards, with forward being positive and backwards being negative. So in this case, they are going to be moving to the right and forward. So we'll see that when we see the video here in a second. The rotation is a bit easier to see with some videos that I've prepared here. So let me see if this is done generating. So our video is done generating here, so we'll look at that in a second. But if we look at rotation along X, looks like this. And this is just kind of a throwaway image I generated, but so positive is kind of going to rotate you upwards like that. So here it is again. That's rotation X positive. Rotation X negative will move you, kind of move you down the opposite direction. Y is going to, positive is going to move you right, negative is going to move you left. And then Z, oops, that's not the one I want to show you yet. Z is going to rotate you, side to side. So positive, it's going to rotate you in a clockwise way. Negative, it's going to rotate you in a counterclockwise way. The next one is noise schedule. So when you're trying to change prompt, it's kind of tricky. It's very trial and error. And this is an interesting thing to play around with because it will add noise into the image. So I've got the Z rotation video. If we look at the original Z rotation video, I had it at 0.02, just like that one. So it kind of does that, kind of makes some creepy face, but the image is still pretty crisp and clean. I think I increased the noise schedule to 0.2 in this one, so like by 10 times. And you can see that when it starts rotating, the image gets a little grainier and it kind of generates things differently. So it kind of increases the noise with each subsequent frame. So that's what increasing the noise schedule does. Strength schedule I haven't played with yet. I'm going to try to play with those a little bit and contrast schedule to make some example videos of what those do and kind of how they might be useful. The rest of them I don't really mess with until we get to the last two, and this is where I think some of the coolest functionality is. You can resume from a time string. So this is a good time to go look back at the video that the system generated. So if we go back to our Deforum Stable Diffusion folder here, we go to output. So the first thing that it generated here is, it puts an MP3 file, which normally will show up as the first. It won't have the 5-digit number at the end of it. So that generated in 30 frames about 2 seconds worth of video. I think the speed that it operates at is 12.5 frames a second. It's either 12 or 12.5. But if we look at the individual frames, we can see where these things change. So starting in frame 0, it's generating a full body portrait of a woman. Cool. So now we get to frame 10, where it should be trying to start turning this beautiful woman into an amazing alien landscape. If I look at the previous image, you don't really see much changing. But if we keep changing it a little and moving forward, you can see some lines start to appear across the face, and you can tell that now we're actually at image 20. So you've got some sort of weird swirls appearing. It's definitely trying to make some changes. You can see stuff appear under the eyes. In my playing with the animations bit, I will let things, if I'm trying to change from one thing to another, I let it run for 150 frames and see what it looks like. If you watch some of my other videos on the channel, particularly the Halloween video, you can see when I start transitioning between prompts. Anywhere from 150 to 300 frames should give you a good idea as to whether it's going to start transitioning into what you want it to transition into. If not, you can back out the last number of frames. So if I wanted to go to, let's take a look at the video that we just generated, and I want to go to frame, didn't quite generate all the way out to 30, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. But let's go back to frame 10, actually 9, and let's say that instead of this prompt on 9, we want to change her into a puppy dog. And now I can say true on resume from time string, and I want to look at this time string, which is the first part of this file name, and make sure that that's what's in here. Hit save, and then we're going to rerun this. Alright, so now we can see that it started generating around frame 10. So there was one thing I forgot to mention in the config file, and that is, let's see where it is, diffusion cadence. So I don't change this, but what this is going to do is it's going to use Stable Diffusion on the first image to generate the first image based on this prompt. Then what it's going to do is generate 3 what it calls like turbo speed frames, which change the camera direction a little bit using Midas, but don't reapply Stable Diffusion until the 4th frame. And then so in between every 2 frames where it's applied Stable Diffusion, this is telling it to put 3 in between frames here. So if we go back to the Conda window, that's what it's doing here. It's creating in between frames. I leave that at 3. It seemed to have pretty good results with it. I think it might be a little too chaotic if you reduced it too much, because you might have a bit too much change on applying Stable Diffusion on every single image, and it would also take a whole lot more time. But while this is generating, I'll kind of tell you my thoughts about what this is and what it isn't. So this isn't going to just animate like a full cartoon for you with a plot or anything like that. I know there's a lot of times where people will try to generate content with the same people or things across multiple different images and get widely varying results unless they train a model with something like Dream Booth. So this has the same inherent problems in it. Each additional frame is going to be something that is potentially not a whole lot different, but over a series of several generations of Stable Diffusion, it might not head in the direction that you're planning it to. So there's sort of an improvisational aspect to this, and I watched a video. I can't remember the guy's name who made it, but I'll post it in the info below. There was a guy who made a comic book using Stable Diffusion, and kind of explains his experience with the improvisational nature that he needed to use to develop that. And I think that's another good video to watch. So what this is good for is just seeing where things go. If you want to start out with a certain image that you've generated in Stable Diffusion, you can trick it to start that way using the resume from timestring. The way that you do that, and I'll go into more detail on this in my next video, but you basically take your output from regular Stable Diffusion and make 4 copies of it and name the first one with a time string in this format, _00000 through 00003. And the reason you have to generate 4 is because it is going to try to back up to the frame prior to the in-between frame count. So I know that's a little confusing, but if you put less than 4 images here, it's going to index where it should be starting as a negative number which will error the system out. So if you copy the same picture 4 times and name it that way, and then do the resume from time string, you can crank through it that way. So it's fun to play around with. I'll leave it at that for this video, but I will post another video soon on some of the cool things that you can do with resuming from time string, as well as kind of how to get the most out of things with camera translations. So hope this was useful for you. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. I'll also post I just started a Discord channel dedicated to animating with Stable Diffusion. It's kind of lonely in there with just me right now, but if you want to come join, trade videos and tricks and tips and that sort of thing, come on. I'll post the channel invite in the info below as well. Thanks for watching, and hope this was useful to you.